Hey everybody, I'm Jamie from the Flow Genome Project and really looking forward to having a great hour with everybody tonight. So first of all, just huge shout out to the worldwide audience that is joining us today. Super inspiring to have people from everywhere from New Zealand and Australia. New Zealand, we're all coming to live with you, by the way, if things continue to get this crazy. I just read a thing in the New Yorker, I think, it was like, no, it was Vanity Fair, saying, what does Peter Thiel know that nobody else does? And apparently he's just installed a safe room in his New Zealand ranch house. But it's really inspiring to see people from all around the world getting together and being curious about specifically neuroscience, embodied cognition or body brain training, and much more simply and importantly, just making the most of our lives together and doing it without needing to resort to excess sort of superstition or magical thinking on one side, or sort of commercialism on the other. So that's what we're here to do today. We're going to jump right in. I'm going to share some images and slides with everybody, and we're going to get started. So the key things first is please make sure you've got a clear, quiet space. You've got a good, strong Wi-Fi connection, and you've also got a pen and paper, something to write with and take notes with. We're going to have a couple of questions. Please feel free to be super active in the chat bar as we go along, even a couple of kind of polls or quizzes to see how everybody compares to the rest of the folks all gathered. And with that, let's go ahead and jump in. So the very first thing that we are going to take a look at is what we're going to cover. And the first thing is just to say, where are you coming in relationship to understanding the Flow Genome Project and our work? So how did you actually get here today? So that there's people who are probably, this is the very first, you might have even just come across this training today and decided to jump in. And other folks might have been extended members of Flow Hacker Nation, part of our kind of global community for a year or more. Some of you may have read Stealing Fire or Rise of Superman or heard us on a podcast or anywhere else. So first things first, just want to kind of check in on how did you get here today? And we'll just kind of check that out in the polls as well. So that's the first one. And we'll see that should drop quite soon by my trusty assistant, Lucas, who's doing amazing things. While he's doing that, I'm just going to kind of give you guys an overview of how we're going to spend our hour. So the first is just to say, hey, this is who we are. This is what we care about. And you guys get to check if that's also true and good for you. Then introduce the big idea or kind of the main point that we're going to be covering tonight. And then really spend the bulk of our time helping you think about and assess your own life. So the diagnostic is what's holding you back. And that's not to say that you're not doing great things, that you're not striving and struggling and accomplishing in your life. But if you were to assess it, what might you do better or differently in your life? And how can an exercise or a workshop like this help you get some clarity on that? From there, I'm going to introduce just a baby step bit about flow, science, and performance so you can kind of understand how those two things work together, both what's holding us back and how fundamentally can flow help us move forward. Okay, it looks like my trusty assistant Lucas got bounced out when he hit play. This is an interesting platform sometimes for that. So stay tuned on the chime in on where you guys came across us, and we're going to drop into the rest of the program. So then at the very end, we will just give you a quick heads up about Flow Fundamentals 3.0. It is our new program that speaks to this kind of training. It's the on-ramp for beginning any kind of training with us. It's the prerequisite for any of our more advanced expeditions, mountaineering, skiing, kite surfing, saltwater fly fishing, or some of our more advanced content classes. So that's kind of it for the jam, and we are going to jump right in. So a little bit about us. We are an international organization that really came about because we felt like there was a big gap between the kind of personal growth, new age, self-help, popular psychology space, which was very much about personal interior experiences, and kind of the scientific and empirical space and peak performance space. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to say, hey, we know personally that these experiences, these peak experiences, known as flow states, but going by a lot of different names, are awesome and fundamentally have been kind of the North Star of our lives. And we wanted to be able to give people credible, practical ways to both understand them, research them, share them, and have more of them themselves. And our board of advisors, our kind of band of colleagues, features honestly some of the most inspired people, professional athletes, world-class neuroscientists, peak performance psychology coaches, the performance psychologist behind the Seattle Seahawks, the PhD performance coach behind all of Red Bull's athletes, Stanford and Harvard and Columbia neuroscientists and biologists. I mean, really, and you know, to say nothing of like adventurers and pro athletes in the extreme skiing, the pro kiteboarding space, all kinds of folks. And it's been amazingly humbling to have so many just world-class people come together around this project, because our goal is not just to do this because we like to geek on it, but to do it so that we can then open source it and share it with the world. Now, 3 years ago, when we set that mission in place, 2020 seemed like a long ass way away. Now we're looking at it, we're like, wow, we've got 2 years left to actually deliver on our mission of open sourcing this entire project to the world. And that's a pretty inspiring thing. It's a great fire to have under our asses, as it were. So let's keep going and basically say some of you may have also come across us via our book, Stealing Fire. And in fact, it is nearly next week will be an exact year since this book came out. And it has been a wild ass ride. I mean, we put it out. In fact, this book clearly, I mean, it happened because we wanted to write about flow states, but it also nearly didn't happen unless we were able to tap into them. So in the 2 years that it took to write this son of a bitch, we came across all kinds of hangups and pushback, including everything from the US Navy potentially not going to give us security clearances on the section that we wrote on SEAL Team 6 after visiting and interviewing them and working with their commanders, all the way to an editor who just literally didn't believe anyone was going to care and wanted us to write The Power of Habit instead, and so being able to check into and recharge from flow states was absolute lifesaver on getting this book out into the world. So from here, just kind of want to lay out for you what we think, and in the simplest sense, what we're going to talk about tonight, because it's a very easy way for you to decide, hey, this feels about right. This is either piques my curiosity, it's a hell yes, or no, wrong place. So before we take any more of anybody else's time, let's just get clear on that. So the first thing is just to acknowledge, and you probably read as I have, you can't really get away from it in the news these days, lots of the kind of litany of us being the worried well these days. And in fact, the World Health Organization last year basically, announced kind of sadly that suicides now outpace both warfare and natural disaster as our #1 killer. Our good friend Jason Silva talks about that quite a bit as well. He's really tried to make sense of that conundrum. And so we're really in this strange, and certainly some of the earlier engineers and even early, not quite founders, but sort of early employees at Facebook, at Google, and others have been coming out and sort of stepping back and saying, what have we done with social media? And clearly the last year and a half in the global political space has been super intense and pretty stressful for many. So it's fair to say that on some level, we are all suffering sort of chronic micro PTSD. And we're very much in a state where our nervous systems, and as a result, our emotions, our psychology, our attention, our performance, are all taking a big and sometimes kind of ugly hit. And what we would advocate, and certainly what we talk about in Stealing Fire, but throughout our organization, is to say, hey, sitting on a couch talking about our feelings has a place, but only a place in how do we live our fullest, best lives. And in fact, if we actually spend more time on our bodies and our brains, integrating them, vitalizing them, pointing them in the right direction to do the right things, right, that we can get an awful lot more out of these 7 or 8 decades that have been given to us, and that it's a lot more fun than just forever going back to our life behind our eyes and our stories. And ultimately, if we can do this, and this is really important, so this may be a great place for people to unplug if this is not your jam. We do not pretend that the human experience is hackable. It's not, right? We're born, we die, and in between is a sumbitch. And getting married, having children, building a career, pursuing our dreams, tolerating the sadness and pain and injustice of the world, figuring it out just in time to grow old. You know, there are things in this human experience that are non-negotiables, and they're not all unicorns and rainbows. And learning to hack flow like a ninja is a necessary but not sufficient part of being a good human. So our intention here is not that you'll learn to make millions in your pajamas, or that you'll lose that last 10 pounds, you know, or that you'll find the sexy young thing of your dreams, or any of those things. I mean, those things can come, but they come as they always have, with focus, dedication, hard work, and good luck. And in between, what we can say, though, is that the road is the road, right? The mountain climb is the climb, but learning to harness peak performance states, learning to be able to shift our states, learning to be able to recharge, recover, get inspired, right? Feel like there's a point and a purpose, definitely makes the journey more interesting and more fun. So this is one of the stories that we talked about in Stealing Fire, actually. This is the America's Cup from 2013. Now, the America's Cup also just happened 4 years later in 2017, last year, and that's a whole additional super interesting story. But I want to focus on this one because it's just a perfect metaphor. It's the metaphor we're going to talk about today. And it's also a perfect metaphor for the notion of flow states and how they live in our lives. So if you look at this boat, you'll notice something really curious about it. And that thing is that it's actually not in the water. It's above the water. And you'll see those kind of little skinny sticks pointing down into the water. Underneath them are sort of dolphin fins called hydrofoils. And when that boat gets going fast enough, the foils actually create lift like an airplane wing. And it actually picks that whole big-ass boat up out of the water. And once it does that, it goes like turbochargers. And it basically outperforms any wind-powered vessel that's ever been on the planet. I mean, like the ancient Phoenicians would look at that thing and go, dear God, like it literally looks like a spaceship to them. And this actually came about because Larry Ellison, who was the CEO and founder of Oracle, the big software company, spent $13 million getting this done. But the interesting thing is that these guys were not fully using the ability, even though they built it and they designed it, they did not trust it enough to say, we're actually going to take longer to get to our destination by making sure we stay up on those hydrofoils because they're so much faster. And the New Zealand team did. And the New Zealand team said, okay, well, our destination's up here. We will actually go way down here super fast and do these big giant zigzags to get to our destination by, ironically, pointing further away from it. And that let the New Zealand team make the most of those hydrofoils. And the Oracle guys were down 6 races to 1. They were getting their clocks cleaned in their own event that they had chosen the terms of and outspent everybody. And finally, their skipper said, well, screw this. We're going to do what this boat is built to do. And they learned to say, we're going to get off the problem, how to get to the finish line as directly as possible by making use of this peak performance that we've got built in. And for many people, that's what hacking flow states are like. Because if you talk to most folks, they're like, oh, how are you doing? Oh, I'm so busy. Oh, I've never slept. Oh, I worked all night on this project, right? And then we have this cult of hard work, dedication, grinding it out, and everybody's just doing more and more and more, harder, harder, harder. And that's very much like that boat just trying to point as directly as it could, grinding its way slowly to its destination. And in reality, we actually have to trust, hey, maybe I should sleep more. Maybe I should go for a walk instead of have that second cup of coffee. And maybe I should take time to balance my life. It will get me to my destinations faster. So that's going to be our theme for the next 30 minutes or so. And what I'd love to do is kind of invite you guys to consider, if that's what peak performance looks like, where are you, right, allowing yourself to lift up onto that foil and become super efficient, super effective? I mean, we've all had those moments, right, where we get more done in the morning than we have the entire week before. So let's think about those moments, and then let's think about what comes between us and popping up on a plane and unlocking our actual capacity. So this is this is potentially, this is the setup for some of the things that hold us back. And this is Ernest Becker is again, this is our buddy Jason Silva is just obsessed with Ernest Becker. And Ernest Becker was a really thoughtful guy and philosopher, but he also was somewhat bleak. And his general take was, look, fundamentally, we are awake and aware little monkeys with clothes. I'm paraphrasing madly here. You can read the quote as I talk, right? We're self-aware monkeys with clothes, just smart enough to realize we're self-aware and we're going to die. And that right there is enough to keep our hands full for a lifetime. And, you know, Shakespeare covered in lots of different ways. Pretty much most art and culture tries to address this in some shape or form, but it is a son of a bitch. So let's just put all this together for a second. And now we're actually going to turn this on to you guys, right? So think about when we said, hey, we are living lives of quiet desperation these days, even though we've got lots of material success. And there's this existential bummer. There's this challenge of being as aware as we are of as much as we are. And that even though we're not getting eaten by saber-toothed tigers and we're not having Attila the Hun, you know, sort of swarm our villages and those kind of things, being alive these days, you know, back to that World Health Organization statistic, being alive today is as big a burden and challenge, maybe, as it's ever been. So the first thing we do is have a diagnostic. So if you're thinking about yourself as one of those high-performance catamarans, like in the America's Cup, and we're at least entertaining the prospect that if I could pop up onto those hydrofoils of like me being in the zone, me being absolutely locked on my best game, would be a 5x improvement. The question is why aren't we all the time? So go ahead and ask yourself, and if we can just go ahead and let's just see if I can put the poll. Okay, so we did get, okay, so here's a good thing. We did get a quick heads up on how you guys came to today. And about a third of you are already Flow hackers and part of Flow Hacker Nation, our kind of worldwide community. About 40%, and there's probably some overlap, I'm imagining, have had a chance to read Stealing Fire. So thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed the stories. 9% heard from a friend and 23% saw a video. So we've got about a good third of folks that are probably relatively new to us, our organization, its mission, the community, and then probably about another 30 to 40% that seem pretty well attributed. So let's just see, where's our next poll? Can we drop down? Yes, here we go. Let's do this, the anchor. So the question here is, what is between you and flying your boat? Right? What is the thing that day to day really seems like it's the one that shows up when you're driving to work, when you're lying in bed at night, when you're sitting over a beer or a glass of wine or a kombucha with your dearest friend? What is the thing that is the anchor that is hardest for you to pull up? And so when we talk about that, just the inner critic, the one who second guesses everything, right? The one who's always making your life harder, really pretty unkind, as a matter of fact. Or you're distracted. So that's the doubt one, right? Never quite sure that you're enough, right? That you're doing the right thing, that you're on point. The distraction, I mean, and this is ubiquitous for us all these days, but how about for you, where you just find it exceptionally hard to actually just be, you know, the so-called smelling roses, actually in this moment and not somewhere else, not in a past, not in a future, but right here, right now. And if you think about, you know, having kids and being at their sports games and looking down at your phone or punching out emails, right? Or you're on a couch with your family, supposedly having must-see TV, but everybody's on their screens, right? How pronounced is that for you? Or the final one, depleted, right? Where you have had goals. New Year's resolutions are probably all just about nosedive by now, right? We all said January 1, by golly, this time I'm going to kick that football, Lucy. And bam, we're flat on our backs by mid-February. So just check. Doubt, distraction, or depletion. Which one is the absolute, we probably all experience all of them, but which one is the strongest for you? And so let's see, we've got a quarter of you guys have come in with doubt, saying that inner critic is my biggest kind of monkey on my back. About a third of you have said distraction, and 40% have said depletion. This is so interesting because every time we run this sample, we get different answers. The last time we did it, the inner critic was overwhelmingly more. And in fact, depletion was the least. So it's really curious. And this could also just be where we are as a society, where we are as a culture, that more people are feeling more of that depletion in their system. But it's always, I mean, every time I think I know what these spreads are going to look like, they turn, you guys show up and give us something completely different. Okay, so that's the case. I want you to really get a clear bead on that, get a clear sense of what it feels like, what your own inner story or explanation around it is, what efforts you tried to try and fix it and have not worked out. So just like fully bring it to life as that anchor. And now let's get super clear. So this is going to be, please feel free. I mean, this is relatively speaking an anonymous forum and, you know, cone of silence and all that good stuff. But the intention here is for us to get clear on what's the impact. So what is the impact of having that anchor dragging along the bottom, preventing you from popping up and doing what you're here to do? And go ahead and type that answer in the comments. And I'm going to see. Let me see if I can scroll. Here are the answers. So you guys go ahead and type these in. There's going to be about, I think, probably a 3 to 5 second delay. So doubt and distraction, says Manan. Depletion, doubt distracts me and leads to depletion. Yes, so it's distraction, absolutely. Okay, Manan saying I have boundless energy. That's fantastic. Okay, here we go. Okay, now we're getting a bunch coming in. Okay, you've lost, what does it cost? Lindsay was saying lots of money. Anita, energy. Leslie saying my life, it feels like it's on hold. Holly was saying she doesn't take risks. Garrett, stress, frustration, and disappointment. Devin was saying depletion is costing me financial gain. Rob, pushing your impact as a coach. Nathan, heartfelt, the only woman I ever loved, my one chance at happiness. Well, hope does spring, as they say, eternal. So I would hang in there on that one, mister. But, you know, and certainly at least entertain the prospect. There may be some additional ways to find some happiness. Rick was saying time with family, friends, health, and some financials. Mikhail was saying makes me want to disappear and die. So please hang in there on that one. We will speak a little bit to some of those senses of life satisfaction and meaning and purpose. But let's just acknowledge that these things are hard, and that carrying them for years, especially if we don't feel like there's support, can be a real challenge. And even when we do have support, the notions of feeling isolated are very real. Ross saying, I have a 10th of the impact I have. James saying, anxiety pervading everything. Anxiety, analysis, paralysis, doubt is costing my confidence to move forward. Okay, so there's all sorts here. These are awesome, guys. Thank you so much for laying that out there. So the next question is going to be a build. And some of you have already kind of just glancingly touched on this, but not just from your point of view, but what about for the people that love you? Think about whether it's your parents, a spouse or significant other, children that you have, right, dear friends. What is the impact on you dragging that anchor behind you on the people you love? So go ahead and just fire those away, and we'll get to see kind of where things are. And again, this is specifically the doubt, the distraction, or the depletion. And we all know we struggle with them collectively, but you've been, I think it's probably most pointed and useful to keep your eye focused on the anchor you've identified. Okay. Lindsay saying very isolated from everybody. Brett saying a lack of connection. So let's take another cut there, Brett, if you can. Like what's that cost, right? What's that actual cost of not being connected to those people? All right. Brandon saying stressing them out and losing patience. Peter, deep and meaningful relationships. James, Hancock, my best self being present to love them as they deserve, hurting the closest to me by taking out, wow, you guys have so many answers. Okay. Taking out my frustration, sadness, and support, more stress, and that bleeds over. Financial strain on my spouse who's the primary breadwinner. The anchor prevents me from having a partner or kids. Okay, that's a big one. Depletion costs my 10-year-old son joyful and fun time with mom. Yeah. Whether I do or don't, I'm role modeling for my daughter. Yeah, these are the humbling bits about parenting. We could have a whole other conversation about that, but can we just acknowledge, right, that family is the great equalizer on all of these things. Evan saying lack of connection to those I love. Shupo, stress and doubt of succeeding. Umberto, I'd rather cut everyone for my own goals. I do not have the problem. I got no one anyway. Okay, well, and if you had the possibility, right, then that might shift or expand. We are social animals at our core. And certainly, in fact, I think I just read something this week that said loneliness actually is a higher predictor of morbidity or mortality than heart disease and cancer. So there's no question about it. We may be naked apes, but apes we still are, and we are born to hang together. Jerry's was saying, depletion, I fully open my heart, but cannot open the hearts of family who are closed and stuck. Missing the opportunity of a life fully lived, says Daniel. Okay. So the point, Beers, no surprise, is just that no man or woman is an island. It has impacts for ourselves, but it absolutely impacts the people closest to us. The whole, you're the sum of the 5 people, blah, blah, blah. Let's just do an assessment for those 5. Because quite often we care more about the impact on them than we might on ourselves. And so it can be a good way to sort of realize, oh, wow, I might be stoic. I might say, oh, I can tolerate this, or I can work around it. But if it's having an impact on someone that we really care about, that didn't sign up for it, that can be a different perspective. And then the next one is the kind of logical conclusion of all of this, which is, what is the impact of dragging that anchor on my work in the world? And several of you, again, have spoke to certain outcomes of that. So we're talking about taking financial hits or losses, but not just, yes, certainly, income is a part of that. But what about vocation? Right? What about that sense of a calling? And what about a sense of creative fulfillment? And we're not all cut out to be Picassos and Michelangelos. And the idea of do what you love and the money will follow is, sometimes a pipe dream. You could also do the exact opposite, and you could do what you're really good at and get paid bank for, and work as little as possible, and then spend the rest of your life doing what you love. Right? That's a very real strategy, and one that doesn't show up in a lot of personal growth workshops. So just want to kind of say there's a wide variety of ways to skin this cat. But what are the costs? Right? What are the costs of dragging that specific anchor, right, behind you all the way in your work in the world? Ricardo was saying doubt. Philippe was saying you never realize your full potential. Okay, so let's get more specific. Let's get beyond the 100,000-foot view and actually say it cost me, right? I did not go to graduate school, or I wanted to be on Broadway and I didn't. And now I'm a theater teacher, or maybe now I'm an insurance salesperson. Whatever it would be. Like, let's get super, super specific if we can. Contentment, your anchor is death, Kathleen. That's a rather intense one. I hope that's not despair, and it's more sort of philosophy. But let's feel free to kind of chime back in and clarify on that one. Let's just see where we are here. Seth was saying, what are we doing here? What we're doing here, Seth, just as other people are coming in, is just assessing what is the number one thing that comes between us and optimal peak performance, and specifically an inner critic, a sense of being never present, or having a motivational gap, those 3 things. And we're just kind of assessing what is the impact on that, because obviously we don't learn, we don't change, we don't grow if we don't have some compelling pain or some compelling goal. So all we're doing is we're just kind of doing a quick analysis, quick self-survey of, is there compelling pain? If not, we're energy efficient little critters. We will keep doing the things we've been doing that have been working more or less. Right? So that's what we're doing, Seth. I hope that helps. James was just saying, anxiety has definitely slowed my creative output as a writer. And great questions bubble up and nothing published. Okay. Still haven't finished the 5 books I've started, said Amy. I went into a career that was safe and now switching to what I love. Okay, fantastic. Piotr, confidence presenting the knowledge I have in graduate school. Lindsay, can't fully contribute what I have to offer. It holds me back. Manan was saying, failed a year in secondary school and had to move and repeat, wasting time. Haven't built your boat, says Dan. Build your boat. Build your boat. How awesome is that, that you're building a boat? Go finish it, man. And fingers crossed it floats. Amy saying distraction costs you self-esteem. Often frustrated, beat yourself up. Not being able to help as many people. Hard to be a new age millionaire, as Jason Silver talks about. Fantastic, Jake. And if anybody doesn't know, that was Jason just saying, hey, in fact, I think he was even talking about a billion. Like, what is it like to become a new definition of billionaire? Right, that's someone who actually helps or impacts a billion people. And I think that's a pretty functional definition in a world that definitely need it. Ross was just saying, we'll do one or two more here. Ross was saying, my work simply doesn't happen because I'd rather pretend to be someone else rather than failing at putting my true self out there. Yeah, that's a doozy. And in fact, I realized way later in my life than I am comfortable admitting that my parents were super duper perfectionists, all this kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, because I always had to be perfect growing up, I ruled out the chance of ever being great. Because if you want to taste greatness, you have to be willing to fail. And because perfect was what I had to be, or what I thought I had to be first, I was never willing to fail. And for anybody that's super switched on, you're like, oh, that's Carol Dweck's Fixed Your Growth Mindsets in a nutshell. And that was me in a nutshell / prison. And it took 5 to 10 years of doing management consulting and advising CEOs and founders who had created tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars of value, and going, wait a second, these guys, they're not any different from me. And in fact, many of them were slower, less thoughtful. And I'm like, why am I coming in once a week to advise these guys? Like, why haven't I built something? So that is a hard ass lesson for sure, for all of us. And hopefully you weren't as ass backwards and slow about figuring it out as I was. Let's just see. One Kathleen was saying, our life works have begun, and I'm so thankful to everyone. Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, so let's go to the next level. We are almost complete with this sort of multi-part exercise. But this is obviously the doozy, which is, if you figured out what your anchor is, either that inner critic or never being fully present, right, or not having enough motivation to close the gap between what you want and what you know you could be and have, and you've assessed its impact on you, you've assessed its impact on the people closest to you, and you've even assessed its impact on your career or vocation, what you feel compelled to do, then the final question is, how much longer until you pull that son of a bitch up? How much longer until you say, hey, I am built to fly, right, at the speed of the wind? And let's get super clear here. What I don't want is a bunch of people to say, not a minute longer, can I get an amen? Right? We're not doing a Tony Robbins show, and we're not doing hallelujahs and rock and roll music and fog machines. Honestly assess this. And what honestly assessing it means is, it could be there are real constraints in your life. There often are. It could be that you've got an aging parent in a hospital and they have another 6 months left. It could be you're working to pay off loans from school. It could be you've got a kid or 2 or 3 that have to get to a certain phase, whether it's out sleeping through the night or out of diapers or into kindergarten or into college. It could be you're in the middle of a divorce. It could be you have a health issue. It could be, you know what, I've just been thinking about this for 5-10 years. I just don't have the activation juice to do it yet. So how much longer, ranging from not a moment longer, now that I'm staring at it in my face, I am ready to act right now, to, this is kind of a slow simmer for me. I'm probably going to be mildly dissatisfied for another 3, 4, 5 years. Hey, whoa, I haven't seen that Simpsons. All right? So check for yourself. So Jason was saying ASAP. Mal, yesterday, Leslie, today was with question marks and exclamations. I'm never quite sure of that kind of creative punctuation. And let's just see. Working on it daily, said Jake. Fantastic. Ryan, no more time to give, time to get out of my way now. Okay. Seema, the problem in my opinion is not I'm assuming that's going to be a want, what we want, but what needs to be done in order to get there. Hell yes, absolutely. Jake, 1 to 2 years until financially stable to branch out. Okay. Kathleen, flying already. Fantastic. Good on you. Jason Hancock, this year. Zishan just actually thought of Tony Robbins, his Dickens patterns. I'm not quite sure what his Dickens pattern is, but I hope it's not obscene. Lindsay, as soon as I'm ready to put myself out there, set clear boundaries and start standing up. Fantastic. So once again, I prefer to be a practical realist about all of this human development stuff. And as I said, the unicorns and rainbows tend not to play out too much. I am not a fan of magical thinking, and I'm not a fan of instantaneous fixes. In fact, I was just with one of the top consulting firms in the world, so sort of, and we were advising some of their Fortune 100 CEOs, and they happened to have somebody come in who said, hey, think of a negative thought and then delete it, and then say that the deletion is now complete and rescinds that thing will never come back in your life. And, knowing developmental psychology, knowing just good old-fashioned hard work and effort, I thought, golly, that is just a crock of shit. And we cannot peddle that kind of thing. We can have catharsis. We can have these momentary breakthroughs, and it feels like the world changes. And then we go back, and we end up regressing back to kind of where we left ourselves off. Now, the only difference is we have seen something better, and we have even felt something better, but it is 100% on us to live back up into that experience. It's like getting a helicopter ride up above the clouds and seeing the top of Mount Everest, and you're like, oh shit, there it is. It's stunningly beautiful. But then the helicopter runs out of fuel, has to land, and we're back down there in the forest. And we know now there's in fact an incredible mountain up above those clouds, but we do still have to shoulder our packs and get our asses up there. So that is, I hope that tracks for you guys. If that's up your alley, that's how we play. So let's keep going and basically sort of introduce what is a potential pathway, and it is in no way it's not the whole shooting match. The whole shooting match is the whole shooting match, which is a human life well lived from end to end. But something that a lot of folks don't always think about are the ability to cultivate peak state skillfully in service of all the things that we just talked about. Right, in service of our life goals, in service of our work in the world, and in service of the people we love. And it goes by a lot of different names. Flow is one of them. And the fundamental thing is just these are the high points of human experience. They have been called, couched in religious terms in the past, but then they were couched in psychological terms in the 20th century, and certainly more and more lately, and even in some small but meaningful way in the articulation of the books we've been writing, talking about them now in the terminology of neurobiology, meaning, hey, we don't actually have to wonder how lightning strikes. We can sort of build an effective Tesla coil. And if you think about, right, we talked about the inner critic, we talked about being distracted, right, never present, and we talked about lacking motivation. Well, something that the research clearly shows about these peak performance states, sometimes called flow, but not always, right, is that we lose our inner critic. We get completely absorbed in the present moment, and our intrinsic motivation goes through the roof. So quite simply, if we're wondering, hey, we didn't choose those terms. Those three anchors, by the way, were 100% correlated with the neuroscience of flow. So we weren't just kind of like taking some random metaphorical path here. We're saying if one of those three things is material to you, then there is a direct research-based correlation to what learning to unlock flow states can do in relationship to that specific income, right? And when we talked about that, that's in Stealing Fire, we talked about a sort of 4-step model of not just flow states, but all kind of ecstatic or non-ordinary states that give us a moment to step outside ourselves, whether it's from smart drugs or smart technology or meditation or breathwork or dance or movement or psychedelics or sexuality, you name it, they all kind of do the same thing under the hood. And the first one is selflessness. Right? We lose that voice in our head. The next one is the timelessness, right? We sort of lose our outside chatter and we become absorbed in the deep now. And then the final one is that effortlessness. And so that is a powerful, and then of course that leads to richness, i.e. inspiration and accelerated informational processing, which is typically the reason why we do it. I mean, some people might be like, I just want to do anything to shut my brain up, and that's fine. But the longer we play in this space, the more we're actually gunning for the richness, the more we're actually using this as a tool to gain accelerated information from who the hell knows. That's the subject for another webinar and another bit. So just to be super clear on this, these are the things that unlocking this flow does from the research-based point of view. It harnesses deep motivation. It accelerates learning by basically tagging all sorts of, all of our new learning and practices with memory and retention markers. By the way, quickest learning hack, you may not like this, put your fingers in your ears if you're a parent, chew nicotine gum. Just got this from Dr. Andrew Huberman at Stanford. Nicotine, as many of you, it's a terrible thing to combust and inhale, but nicotine as a performance-enhancing neurological stimulator is a banging hack for actually learning that. So that's one thing to think about. But flow, being in these states, forget the gum, but just putting yourself in these states can halve the time to mastery if cultivated done right. And as far as life satisfaction, not so much happiness, but actual overall life satisfaction, the people who have the most of these experiences, kind of not surprising once you say it out loud, are also the most fulfilled on the planet. So that's kind of powerful stuff. So if that was just magical, mystical, lucky duck, and we didn't know what to do with it, this would be the end. We wouldn't even have this training. The whole reason we exist is because we wanted to demystify this stuff. And we say, look, there's no reason to either overblow it or think you're not cut out for it, or think that it's only the domain of mystics and yogis and extreme athletes and fancy artists and people not like me. It's absolutely available for all of us, and it's actually remarkably easy to train. Now, this is the nerdiest thing ever, but this is kind of what we talk about as the genome of flow. If you wonder where we got our name, this is it. The idea that, hey, there are building blocks to the interior subjective states we love so much that feel so awesome, and doesn't need to be mystical. And in fact, what you realize in a heartbeat is that this right-hand side of things, life gets super, super interesting. And if we can learn to tune the knobs and levers of our bodies and brains, we get to spend more time over there. We get to reap, the harvest of being in those peak states, being up on those hydrofoils, traveling way faster than we can. And just so you know, like, this is not just a concept. We have actually explicitly used this map right here to build a number of different practices over the last 3, 4, 5 years. And they have all worked not just better than we thought they should based on the research, like 10x, 5 to 10x better than we imagined. So like, it's absolutely hackable human consciousness and culture. Kind of the raddest thing ever. Now, so what that lets us do is it lets us no longer be neurotic little monkeys seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. We actually get to level up our minds from a place where I'm just living behind my eyes, living my psychological story, to a person, right, who's saying, hey, here's my neurology, here's my cardiac state, here's my posture, my respiration, everything else, and I can tune that. And I can move it from the operating system of my whole being, I am just my story, happy or sad today, to actually being up on the balcony, watching all the apps and tuning and calibrating them. And again, an entire evening we could spend just talking about that mission. But it's powerful, and it's potentially limitlessly profound. And to get a sense of what's possible, and because we promised you, hey, what is the magic of 4%? Well, in the simplest sense, we have found, and this comes from our initial 6-week online training, and some of you have already taken earlier versions of it. Some of you are, haven't heard of it yet. But in 6 weeks, we basically asked test subjects to go through a series of exercises, go through a series of self-diagnostics, do a lot of implementations, actually do the practices. And in 1 hour a day, which 1 divided by 24, so 1 of your 24 hours a day is 4%. And by investing 4% of your life in cranking up those anchors, these are the boosts that people got. They got 112% increase, right, in basically self-confidence and lack of inner critic. They got an 85% increase in motivation or drive. They got an 88% increase in the sense of being focused in the present moment. Those are pretty powerful numbers, especially when you consider it was 6 weeks, it's online, and it's 60 minutes a day. So our final question for you today is, what would you do with those boosts? Well, let's go ahead and just kind of put that into your poll, and let's see, where would you put that energy? Because we just talked about the anchors dragging us, and that's relatively sad and depressing. But maybe we don't have it. Do we have it? I just pulled that down. There we go. Bam. Where are you going to, or if you could, right? If you could get not just anchored by your inner critic, but you could have 112% more confidence. Yes, I am a good, true human being trying my level damnedest, right? And I get to go do it without second guessing, right? Or 88% more. I'm here now, no place else, right? When the past is the past, and when I get to the future, I will be 100% present for that too, right? Or 85% more drive. So what do you have? Oh, come on, guys. No one's, I mean, yes, the all of the above is an easy one. I'm also always curious for contrast. Some of you did say, though, let's see, it's a something percent. Maybe it's a 10%. Said you'd have more adventure. In general, I think the key to like long, happy lives is novelty, seeking novelty and making art. And I don't mean art like necessarily paintings of flowers and macrame baskets, but art in the sense of just like basically an undeniably human creation, where you've left your mark. It could be a garden, it could be a soup kitchen, it could be a mural, but something like I created, right, a slightly more beautiful world. And then when we stop having novelty, when we stop making art, I think that, existential collapse is quick on our heels. So let's just see. Here we go. So, okay, some folks said 10% deepen my purpose, 6% have more adventure, 9% boost my career. So it looks like either these were the latecomers or you guys changed your votes, and 72% said all of the above. Awesome. And the simplest answer is obviously people talk about work-life balance, and that's a tricky one, because it's as if we're different compartmentalized selves. Our reality is we are who we are, and our lives are our lives. And hopefully, now granted, if you are purely doing something for economic return and you have zero connection or passion or relationship with that thing, the best request is, to the extent that you can, as soon as you can, try and transition out of it. But for the rest of us who have some proximal alignment with what we do in the world and what we care about and what we studied or learned or practiced and got good at, hopefully it is integrated. Right? As Alice Walker, the Pulitzer Prize winning author of The Color Purple, said, she said she was describing two of her characters, and she said there was no seams in our life. It was whole cloth. And that notion of a life of whole cloth, I think, is really beautiful. And by the sounds of things, 2/3 of you guys agree on that one as well. So let's bring this on home, and hopefully you could get a sense of both what's been the cost of dragging those anchors, and what's the possibility of stepping up and accelerating your growth. Right? What happens? This is what it would be like if you were up on a plane, and those are some of the destinations. Those are some of the lived experiences that are there, that are actually, evidentially in reach, and that means not pie in the sky. That means people just like you, thousands of people, just like you, have conducted this kind of experiment and have had those kinds of results. So this is in conclusion what's possible next, right? And this is an old quote from the Tao Te Ching, a sort of Chinese book of Taoist wisdom. And it basically says, on hearing of the way, and the way in that case is comparable to a flow state, right? The wise man, the wise person, picks it up and makes it their own. And the mediocre person studies it for a while and sets it down. And the fool just laughs. And if it were not so, it would not be the way. And in this day and age, you can say, the fool just trolls, or something else. But it's a great point when faced with these kind of tools, techniques, practices. If you're switched on, right, that person can say, hell yes, this is gold. I'm going to cherish it. The person who has other distractions might be curious about it for a little while, But once the novelty curve is over, they're looking for the next bright, shiny object. They set aside, they forget that they actually had the answer. And they keep going and looking for newer, brighter versions. And then the fool does not know what they're looking at, and even ridicules or mocks it, either because it's too simple, it's too easy, it's too complex, doesn't really matter. Right? So that's our final one. Let's just see, this is our final poll. And this is, in some respects, not a total setup, but a setup, which is, which of those three, right, are you going to be? And not just in the realm of kind of the quote, but in the realm of the idea of what are you going to do now? Because the first category, which is, okay, I hung out on a webinar, interesting, and off you go into your life. Okay, cool. Thank you for coming. Really glad to connect, and hope that in some respects it's useful. But you are not our people, and that's not any judge or assessment of morals, ethics, personality, likability, anything like that. It's just we're a training organization, so we're not into edutainment. You can look at our videos online. You can look at lots of other people's videos online. There's plenty of edutainment out there, right? We are interested in buckets number 2 and 3. So if you are interested, if you are in bucket number 2, which is, hey, you're a bit of a self-starter, you think you kind of got enough to go with, and you want to get cracking on this yourself, Godspeed. We're fired up to support you. In fact, the simplest thing you can do is there's a free flow profile, which you can check out on our website, and I think we can even pop up a link to it. Feel free to check that. That's which one of 4 categories are you most likely to get into flow. When you've taken it, you're contributing to a huge database of like 75,000 other people that have taken it. You also get kind of like a manual of like, here's your kind of superpowers and kryptonite. In fact, I think I might even have an image of that. Yeah, it will help you kind of understand a little bit more as to how you uniquely get into flow states. And then there's bucket number 3. The folks who say, actually, that anchor, I'm clear on it. I'm not willing to wait longer, and I actually want to start training with other folks. And that would be what we're actually launching March the 5th, which is Flow Fundamentals in its newest version. So if you are interested, and by the way, Ian Ayers, who's an economist at Yale University who focuses all on motivations and incentives, he's like, basically, if you try to do something yourself, you have sort of like a 1x chance of pulling it off. If you do it in community with accountability to others, it doubles. And if you do it with community plus accountability, it triples. So think about the value that you assign to pulling up that anchor. And then you say, okay, I could do it myself. That's a 1x chance of pulling it off. Or I could do it in community with accountability. And that triples my likelihood of success. And I'm just going to give you guys a quick overview of this, because this is brand new and I'm just geeked on this. So if you'll indulge me for like 2 minutes, I'll just tell you a little bit about the new elements that we're adding, other than like completely reshooting and doing everything else for this new version of the course. The 2 coolest things is heart rate variability training, because it also trains breathing and your vagal nerve and your heart into very strong rhythms. We wrote about this in Stealing Fire, but actually your ability to entrain other people to you is an incredibly potent thing, and your ability to recover. We just did a study with police officers, first responders, and when they have a stress response, it often took them like a day and a half to never, aka PTSD, to recover from those stressful responses, like a near shooting or some other kind of crazy incident. When they trained with this heart rate variability monitor in practice, they got it down to getting back to level in as little as 18 minutes. So imagine our lives where we're constantly stressed and going from a day and a half to 2 or 3 days to never recovering from our stressful events, to being able to be so resilient we can come back in 18 minutes. And the final one is this DNA test, which is we have actually done the genome of flow. This is your genotype. So when we do the flow profile, that's your traitology, like what kind of person am I? When we do a biographical analysis, you actually get to know your phenotype, meaning how have you expressed seeking flow in your life and in your past, so you can get a better sense of it. And now we've actually even got the genotype, which is just super badass, because now you're testing 16 DNA strands that go together with your biographical history and your psychological profile and give you a fully dimensioned sense of this is me, my relationship to peak performance, and here is how I get more of it. So that is it, guys. That's the overview. If anybody is interested in joining us, it's going to be a super fun program. We spent all of December and January, completely rebuilding it, putting it all together, launching it now. We didn't want to do it anytime sooner than when it was perfect. We've got some beta testers going through it right now as we speak, and our new class kicks off in March. So there's a link to check it out. There's a landing page. You can learn lots more and all of that. But right now, I want to open it up to questions and want to basically just say, hey, we've just gone through an introductory training. So you get a sense of a little bit of who we are, a little bit of how we roll, a little bit of the terms and concepts and approaches that we use. And hopefully you've also been generating a little bit of, fundamentally your own content. Like I'm now actually thinking about my life and potentially in a different way than I was an hour ago. And I'm also thinking about options going forward that I might not have considered or thought as explicitly about an hour ago. So really, would love to just be, hey, this is just free time. So let's just take 5-10 minutes and see what's what. So let me just go up to the top. Ron was just saying, thanks. Jerry was saying, can you use other DNA results from 23andMe and National Geographic? I bet you could, if we could work with our partners and say, here's the DNA strands, which ones got signaled for you on and off. So we can talk about that, but you can certainly cross-reference them for sure. Let's just hear any more. What are the chemicals in the brain that are released during flow states, and how do we get them released? Well, that is a long, infinitely rich conversation. We typically talk about the big 6 neurochemicals. So in ever so rough order of secretion, right? So norepinephrine as a sort of alertness, right? Dopamine, endorphins, anandamide, serotonin, and oxytocin, and it's not all 6 all the time, but it is typically, at least if you keep your ears cocked in any kind of research or studies and you see 3 or more of them show up, know that you're on the right track, and that's going to be generally an interesting experience to have or to cultivate. And ways to cultivate is what we do, so we are forever playing in that space. But respiration, movement, sexuality, and sacraments or substances are probably your best, throwing music in the mix. Manan, is it possible to get a student discount on the course? Quite possibly, depends on what you're up to, where you're up to, and what you want to do with it. But typically, we ask for students to engage and then also do some form of basically self-guided research on the way back to give back to the community. So we're big fans of supporting people in different places in their life, and we ask that you actually contribute to our collective learning as well. Kara was saying, have done flow fundamentals twice. So there you go. The discipline of daily flow training, the flow community provided a great foundation. Yeah, well, Kara crushes it. She's a total ringer, so don't let her testimonies fool you. She was an extreme inline skater, a hip-hop dance instructor, an author, a yoga teacher, all kinds of things, like a high-octane force of nature. So your mileage will vary from hers, but thank you, Kara. Thomas, you said, I took 2.0 with the best version myself during and about a month after that. Then you fell back into old habits. Would 3.0 be the best way to kickstart things again? Or would you suggest something else? Well, I mean, it's totally your call. You tell me, you tell us whether you feel like you've got the concepts and you know that element and you're looking for something more, or you really need the community accountability support to simply just work the program. Either way, you can either take our next level course, Flow Performance, which gets much more into the content of Stealing Fire, or you could say, hey, you know what, I'm going to come back to nail my fundamentals, and then once I've got a good head of steam up, do something. Jane was saying, Anthony was just saying, love 2.0, please explain the difference. So fundamentally, production quality. So everything is shot in a professional studio. The conversations are all compressed. So everything we learn from 1.0, which was our beta test with Google, to 2.0, which is if you guys took it on an app you learned about, is fundamentally built into this one. So the content is more compressed in shorter units. Any lack of clarity or confusions, those kinds of things have been ironed out. The HRV training on a daily basis, morning and evening. The DNA testing as an addition to the biographical and typological practices are new. So fundamentally, I would say you're looking at about a 15 to 30% sort of improvement, increase, reflection, and tightening. The practices and the principles are going to be very similar. I mean, they are what we think are the best things for folks to get started on. But as far as user experience, as well as the interactions of the DNA, the HRV, and those kind of things, those are all new. We're really stoked on it. Okay, Jairus was saying, are you thinking about doing virtual reality flow training? like on Facebook Spaces. Well, I haven't seen Facebook Spaces. I'm imagining that's going to have to do with Oculus. Short answers, don't know, but I'm super curious. So I'd love to check that out. So Sandra, you can just write to lucas@flowgenomeproject.com and feel free to kind of just let them know who you are, and we can kind of check out that process as well. How is the community interaction mediated, asked Mary? So that's fundamentally myself as well as other FGP coaches are in the feed, which is a private feed inside the app where everyone is training. Your class all launches together. That's what we do once a month, so that everybody gets to stay together and be going through the same things at the same time. Where can I find info on the HRV monitor? I have a Thought Technology neurofeedback unit and could simply buy an HRV sensor for that unit. Well, I mean, simple answer is go and check out Inner Balance. Inner Balance, by the way, is really good for straightforward, basic HRV training. When we're doing more sophisticated studies, we use different stuff, but as far as its phone-based interface, as far as its accessibility, ease of use, you don't need a chest strap. It just has a nice earpiece, so you're not having to rummage with clothes. So you can do it at the office, you can do it on a plane, those kind of things. That's why we use it for this level of training. There are more sophisticated, more data accurate biohacking tools, period. But we tend to go with, we'd rather have people use something and stick with it than get overly complicated or try something and then forget to do the habits, because we are 100% about creating habits that change lives. So I'll do 2 more questions, okay? So let's just see how this goes. So let's just see. Anonymous is saying, how would you consider the effects of the Internet of Things in optimizing flow, writing a report on the effects in the office? Well, short answer is that ever connected, ever distracted is not necessarily flow supportive. And so it is important that we remember that we have the tools don't have us, and that there is a lot. I mean, Nicholas Carr wrote about this 4 or 5 years ago in The Shallows, but I mean, the idea that we are shortening our attention spans, we are increasing our irritability, our anxiety, our distractibility, we are impeding our ability to think deeply, which is a key component of flow. I would say in general, let's be really cautious. I'm not positive I need Amazon Prime to know when my tub of butter is half empty and shows up on my doorstep. And the impact of that is relatively insidious, and we're not clear on all the long-term effects. So final one, Jamie, is there going to be a master instructor or mastermind program? I'm imagining that you mean are we doing some form of coach certification or training? Maybe. If so, yes, we are. We're launching that in the next month or 2. We're just waiting to get confirmation on where our flow camp this summer is going to be, because people who want to coach with us, step 1 is, or want to work in an organization or anything like that, we're like, you don't walk into a dojo and say, I want to be a Kung Fu teacher. Let me show up. We're like, no, you start by training. So Flow Fundamentals is the on-ramp for everything. It's the on-ramp for our advanced digital courses. It's the on-ramp for invitations to our live trainings and events. And from there, yes, we are actually stoked. We have held off doing a coach certification program until now because we did not want to just be rubber stamping people that we couldn't vouch for as truly embodying the thing we're talking about. So that's the goals. Anthony, Greg, glad to see you psyched. Manan, Occam's razor, always Occam. William of Occam, 13th century, England, I believe. Go and look it up if you don't already know that, but fundamentally it's the simplest answer is typically the best. And I'll leave you guys with that, which is the simplest answer into the sense of what is the meaning of life is to live it. Is to live it and live it as large as we possibly can, and learning to access flow and learning to share that with other good people along the way is about as good an answer as I've ever come across. So hope that works for you guys. Thank you so much for joining us today, and really look forward to seeing you on the other side in Flow Fundamentals. Be well, everybody.